The Meeples and Miniatures podcast is sponsored by Two Fat Lardies, Code Darms Paints, and Miniature War Games with Battle Games magazine, and also by the generous donations of you, the listener. Thanks to everybody for their continued support. The Meeples and Miniatures podcast, episode 124, Polyversal, with hosts Neil Shuck and Mike Hobbs, and guest Ken Whitehurst. This show was recorded on the 27th of February 2014. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Meeples and Miniatures podcast. I'm Neil Shuck and today I'm joined by Mike Hobbs.
Hello.
Hi Mike, welcome to the show again, and it's good to chat. It seems like ages since we talked together actually.
No, it was last week, mate. We had a nice little natter on Skype.
Well, yeah, but we haven't been on the show for ages, or at least so it seems. Or at least Christmas seems an awfully long time ago, put it that way.
Yeah, I think this is our first one of 2014.
Indeed. What's better is the new technology is working fine, and apparently my new internet hub doesn't care that both my family are streaming upstairs. Google Plus still works fine, and I'm not relegated to the kitchen for this podcast. I'm sure you wanted to know that information.
I was concerned. I'm glad you've clarified that.
Well, there we go. Well, what have you got in store for you today? Well, actually, this all comes about from a conversation we had, probably before Christmas, where Mike, in one of our we tend to be quite sad and kind of Skype message each other on days when on days when things are a little bit quiet. So that tends to be at least a couple of times a week, and so, or perhaps more often from time to time. But Mike suddenly popped up and said, because we've been discussing about potentially doing a show on Epic, which is one of Mike's great loves in wargaming.
It is my soul love in wargaming. It's my favourite game.
Right, and yes, you are threatened. We will be talking to Mike about his greatest love at some point this year. I've promised him that. We'll see how we go.
I got a script and everything.
Oh, you're there. Right, okay, fair enough. Right, anyway, but basically what came about is that Mike suddenly cropped up and went, I've been exchanging Twitter with this guy Ken Whitehurst, and have you heard about this game called Polyversal? Now, Ken's been a long-time listener to this podcast. I've corresponded with him on several occasions, going way back, and I know him from his podcasting days when he was podcasting with the D6 Generation and doing This Week in Wargaming and what have you. So it was a name I was familiar with. And actually, it turned out that the Twitter feed that Mike mentioned, I just didn't realise it was Ken. Yeah, it's one of those things that you've been following a Twitter feed, but you don't actually realise exactly who it is. These things happen from time to time, hey-o. Anyway, so Mike got up and said, hey, have you heard of this game Polyversal? Sent me all the links to the website and what have you, and suggested that it might be worth having a chat with Ken about everything that's going on. Because, again, Mike's had an idea about us chatting. What do you do with all these models that you've collected over the years and haven't got a rule system for?
Because we've all got lots of them.
It's a show, or maybe a couple of shows that we have all these crazy ideas going on in the background, and it's certainly something we wanted to talk about. And here we are in a situation where Ken has actually put something like this in this sort of vein, and so we thought it'd be a really good idea to get Ken onto the show and to chat about this game concept that he's in the middle of putting together. So that's what we're going to do. So it's taken a few weeks. It's taken probably a little bit longer to put together, with just kind of putting all our free time together and this, that, and the other. But thankfully, especially considering the transatlantic time difference, we've managed to get together, and we've recorded a chat with Ken. So what you're about to listen to is probably about an hour and 3/4 of us chatting with Ken about everything behind the game called Polyversal.
I must get through to Sergeant Watson's position. Jenkins, cover me.
Sir.
Whoa. Sergeant Watson, bring your men in. Withdraw.
It's all right, sir. We're enjoying ourselves.
What?
Yes, sir. It's these here chain of command rules, sir. We're having great fun.
Chain of command?
That's right, sir. It's a challenging but fun blend of command and control. It gives me the freedom I want to fight the way I want to. Never had so much fun, sir. And we've cooked you some sausages. Can't be helped, sir. Me and the lads are staying put.
Chain of command, World War II, platoon level rules from two fat laddies. They really put you in control. And they're even better than sausages.
Well, I'm very pleased to welcome to today's Meeples and Miniatures podcast, Ken Whitehurst. Hello, Ken. All the way from America.
Hello. By shortwave radio, we have connected across the ocean.
The wonders of modern technology. Here we are.
And for those of you listening, if you're not familiar with this accent, this is what happens to an English accent after about 300 years of living in Virginia in the United States.
Well, it's great to have you on the show, Ken. Welcome. The plan is today we're going to be talking to Ken about a project that he's currently got underway that is, if I remember rightly, imminently due to hit Kickstarter. Is that correct?
Well, that phrase scares me. But yes, this year, our goal is to have it on Kickstarter this year.
Right.
We just don't have a date yet, but I'm told it will be this year.
That is a project called Polyversal, which is something that Mike actually flagged up to me. Before Christmas, was this, Mike? I can't remember.
Yeah, it was about that time, wasn't it? I think I saw it on the Twitter, where me and Ken follow each other, and noticed this word 6mm Sci-Fi, and suddenly got very interested. But before we hit that, let's do the usual Ken's personal history of wargaming.
Indeed, because some of you listening to Ken may recognise his voice, because he's no stranger to podcasting. And I'm sure, amongst everything else that we'll talk about, we might kind of just cover a little bit of that as well. So, first off, as Ken is a first time on the podcast, we do what we usually do with our guests. And Ken, can you please tell us, how did you get into this wonderful thing called wargaming?
You know, it's funny. I think the answer to this, and this is really strange, because I've listened to The View from the Veranda many times, and I've heard you and Henry talk a lot about Donald Featherstone and the books from that time. You know, Bruce Quarry, those guys. And what's interesting is I grew up here in Virginia. I live in Virginia Beach, Virginia, and I used to go to the library a lot as a kid. And one of the things I discovered in the library was this fantastic book by a certain H.G. Wells called Little Wars. And believe it or not, I came into the hobby pretty much directly because of H.G. Wells, which is almost unheard of in someone my age. I'm about 30. Well, I'm 37 now. I found that book, and I had been interested. I'd always enjoyed making models and building things like that, and I've always liked tanks, and so the idea that you could play a game with all of that stuff was fascinating to me. So when I was a kid, I took green army men, which came in buckets you could get at the local store, and set them up on the floor and played Little Wars with them using a little yellow gun that shot little pellets that you could get like at a drugstore.
Yeah.
And I actually played Little Wars by the rules on the floor of my room as a kid, like someone would in the 1940s, I guess. And then I found Donald Featherstone's books and Bruce Quarry's books, but I had never met anyone around here who had heard of anything like that. I mean, it was just unheard of. So when I turned 15, I found a copy of White Dwarf magazine at a science fiction convention because I liked science fiction, and read an article about this crazy game involving hundreds of figures and recognized it as what must be the modern equivalent of this book I had seen in the library when I was younger.
Yeah.
And it was talking about the game, and the game was actually Space Marine, not 40K, although I read about 40K as well. And so I hunted down Space Marine, and my dad got it for me for my 16th birthday. And that was in 93. And I basically had been, my dad also said, I don't know why I'm buying this for you. You'll never play with it. And I still play with it. I am now 37 years old. And so it sort of took off from there. I guess it went from Space Marine to not counting board games and all that. I mean, I've always liked board games and card games and all of that sort of thing. But Space Marine really captured my imagination like nothing else. And we hunted it down. I went to the first Games Day in North America when I was a teenager. My friends and I drove up to Maryland and went to that.
Oh, okay.
And I actually played in the very first game of Space Marine, played at the very first Games Day in North America in 1993. It was kind of a pilgrimage for us. I had a small group that we played with, and so we played a lot of that. Then I discovered BattleTech because I went to trade in a bunch of Magic cards that I had, which had become suddenly very valuable. And I didn't really like the game anymore, and so the store owner took them all in for credit, which I now realize would probably be worth a whole lot of money if I still had them. Because they're from the.
I think we've all been there, haven't we?
They're alpha. I mean, they're the very original, ones with mistakes on them, stuff like that. They're probably worth thousands of dollars now, but at the time, they were worth like $50, which was still 4 times what I paid for them, probably. So, I got into BattleTech. I played a lot of BattleTech, and then from there, I don't remember. I mean, I played a lot of Dirtside 2 in college, which probably is a natural progression of these games. But I've always really liked the 6 mil because I like strategy. I've never really liked the skirmish games. I've played them. I played Fantasy. I've played 40K. I still collect a lot of them. I love the miniatures for them. But the games, to me, I'd much rather feel like I'm taking over a city or something than like taking over someone's house. It just seems grander to me.
Yeah, I was going to say, because immediately when you first said, the first game you got was Space Marine. I mean, that is a little unusual, considering most people, unless they've been playing micro armor games, don't tend to go, well, in my experience, don't tend to immediately aim at that small scale.
Right.
Hello.
Well,
me as well. It was my first game, and probably the best game GW ever did.
I still think it is I think it's the best game they've ever made. Although I admit, I think Blood Bowl is brilliant. I got into GW in what I guess many of us now think of as the golden age of GW. Certainly, probably in this country. Although I think there too. I mean, I had seen Talisman and Hero Quest as a kid. I love those games, and then those sort of got you were at least in America aware that there was this company, Games Workshop, although we didn't really know what it was. I traveled to England when I was in high school and got to actually go to a Games Workshop store, which didn't exist anywhere near here for another 10 years probably. I mean, you couldn't go to Games Workshop stores in most places in the United States. Yeah. There's now one right around the corner from my house, which is just mind-boggling to me. But when I was a kid, we had to mail...
Also, what dangerous?
It's nice. I remember saying to my friend the day it opened that it's about 20 years too late for me because I don't really need much from Games Workshop anymore. They certainly don't sell any Epic. I mean, you can order it, but I have an entire Dark Angels army. I bought a flyer. I might buy a knight just because they're cool, but you really don't need it that much. I don't need a place to game, and I don't really want to play 40K. And you can't go in there and play. I couldn't break out a game of, anything else other than 40K or The Hobbit or whatever else they have now. Warhammer, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right about the scale. I remember at the time even thinking that I had fallen into a niche within a niche, because if you went to a store in this country in the 90s and asked for Space Marine stuff, if they had heard of it, which was almost never, the answer would have been, yeah, we have that. And of course it was 40K stuff.
Yeah.
And so even the people who carried it didn't know what it was. And we had to bring them printed out GW catalogs from England and say, look, they make all these other things that are very tiny. And they're like, well, no one wants those. And so we would have to get them ordered special. So the idea that I somehow forged my way into this hobby here in what is a complete desert of epic gaming is unusual, to say the least.
And again, in some ways it's quite unusual going from something like BattleTech, which I suppose is relatively quite mass market in the grand scheme scheme of things, to something like Dirtside.
Well, that happened. I don't know if that's the literal. Let's see. By the time I played, I guess BattleTech came. I had played Fantasy. I had played 40K, and then Dirtside came about because I went to college, I think, and my college town, as college towns tend to do, had much more intelligent gamer stores. They had a hobby shop that actually carried pretty hardcore gaming stuff. I mean, most hobby shops in America carry art supplies and drafting equipment and stuff for people who sew and make scrapbooks, and they carry a few model kits and some spray paint, and that's about it. You have to find a really specialty game store to get anywhere near this kind of stuff. Certainly then, this would have been in the late 90s. And there were a couple of really good game stores in Charlottesville where I went to college at UVA, the University of Virginia, for those of you not in the know. But the school there was a guy there who said, oh, you like BattleTech, you might like this book, and they showed me Dirtside. And I think that's how I got to Dirtside, because I started collecting BattleTech miniatures, and I have to this day, I have pretty much every miniature there was ever made for Epic, at least 5 or 10 of them, frankly. And the BattleTech, my brain started to say, what would happen to a unit of battle mechs if it faced a Warlord Titan, for example, or what would happen if you mixed these together? Because I had the miniatures.
What, the world wouldn't come to an end?
And yeah, exactly. And apparently, a cease and desist letter would issue from one or both of those companies.
That's what normally happens. Yeah, I think so.
That's what I'm told. But so Dirtside is the game for that, or it was, and it has its own benefits and flaws, frankly. And I found some micro armor, so it started to all kind of mix together in my collection. And I guess that's how I ended up getting to where Polyversal is. But in the meantime, I've played Dirtside. Dystopian Wars I really like. War Master. Anything that involves a whole lot of things that are very small, I tend to like more than things that involve a very few things that are very large, with a few exceptions. I will say I really like, what is that skirmish game from Ganesha? Songs of Blades and Heroes.
Song of Blades and Heroes.
Yeah, all of those. I know you've talked about him on the show before. Andreas Svilgoy, is that his name? Whatever that system is he created is pretty brilliant, I think. Because it'll bolt on a lot of things pretty easily, which is fun.
Well, I think we could quite easily chat about Epic for the next 2 hours, Ken, because I'm a huge Epic fan as well.
That's fine with me. I don't get to do it very often.
However, you don't have the Dark Angel company, because I've got them here as well. So
yeah.
Do you can't both have it.
I've got Dark Angels. Yeah.
Right.
I got the entire chapter
in Epic. Do you have it in Epic? Yeah, I have it. It's funny. I've painted some in Epic. I have some Dark Angels in Epic, and I tend to paint more, of course.
Yeah.
I have a bad. I don't know what my unpainted to painted ratio is. I was looking at it the other night. I think it might be 100-1. It's some horrible. I have far more than I'll ever paint. I mean, I can't paint fast enough to paint everything I own.
Yeah,
we
all do. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, we don't talk about unpainted miniatures on this show.
Okay.
Our wives might be listening.
All of mine are painted.
Right. So, you got into Dirt Side and have been playing other games since, but obviously you've been getting on with other things in the hobby as well. How did you first get involved with D6 Generation?
You know, I don't know why, but I was listening to the show when it was brand new. I've liked podcasting because I'm an attorney, a lawyer, a barrister over there, I guess, and I spend a lot of time driving around town in my car and not around people who know this hobby much, and it's kind of one of those things you just have to keep in your head and you don't just walk up to people and say, yeah, I paint tiny miniatures and move them around a table for fun. And so when you're in your car, of course, you can listen to those things. And the D6 Generation was so good a podcast, I thought, fundamentally when it started. I could tell these guys really knew what they were doing. They loved the hobby. Russ, I think, had owned a store. He had run Daka Daka, or Daka Daka, depending on your region. And I could tell they were doing something really good, and I wanted to sort of support it, but I frankly, just sending the money I guess that would have been nice. I'm sure they would have preferred it. But I emailed them and said, hey, I have this idea that I've always thought of would be kind of cool for a podcast, but I didn't know it wasn't enough for a whole podcast on its own, and I didn't have the time to make a podcast on my own. And it was the idea that, people play music when they're gaming. It would be cool to pair music with gaming. So I recorded a test, I basically just made it up and recorded a 5-minute segment and emailed it to them and said, would you like this on your show? And I think they were looking for, content, and it was free. And frankly, that's probably why it got on there. But it was just literally a shot in the dark. I emailed them and said, I'll do it.
I have to say, it was one of my favourite segments. I was gutted when you stopped doing it.
Well, thank you. The reason I was able to do it was because I had just left my job in a giant law firm, which sucked up all of my time, and now I work for the federal government, and so I have more free time. I don't work 24 hours a day. I work 8 hours a day, and so I also had I think my son was relatively young at the time, so I wasn't getting out much, and I could spend the time. It's an amazing amount of work to do that. That little podcast was about 5 minutes long per episode. I made, I think, 10 episodes of it, and it would take me, I'd guess 10 hours at least to record it, because I had to find the music, I had to edit the music out down to, I had to, think of the music, edit down 30-second clips of it that were actually representative of it, which is almost impossible because most of it's 7 or 8 minutes long.
Yeah.
And, piece it together and then sort of write a script. It was very scripted. I had to really plan it out. It's sort of against all of my instincts. I'm very much not a scripted kind of person, but it was a lot of fun to do. And I started to feel like it was becoming work, and you would be able to hear that in my voice, and I didn't want that to be the case. So I just stopped doing it.
No, I can appreciate that. It's sometimes people don't appreciate just exactly what it takes to record something like this, even something as off the cuff as what we're doing at the moment.
Well, I will say now that since I'm designing a game, I don't have the free time. That's also part of where this went, is that free time got swallowed up by Polyversal, quite frankly.
Yeah, because on top of that as well, for a while you actually took on This Week in Wargaming when Troy McCauley had to give that, didn't you?
Yes, the worst titled podcast ever made. Troy did a great job with This Week in Wargaming, and his life wonderfully. I think he got married, I think is what had happened to him, which is great. I had been married for quite some time, so I had balanced out my life in that way. But foolishly, I emailed him and said, "Hey, I do the score section on the D6 Generation, so I have all the equipment set up. I know how to record and do this. I love the hobby. I think I can do it." And he basically said, "Well, no one else applied, so it's yours." And that's exactly how I got This Week in Wargaming. He had all the goodwill built. He had built the blog. He had, I think we were using Libsyn. He had it all set up, which was all the stuff I didn't know how to do. I'm pretty good at talking, but I'm not real familiar with how internet, blogs and all of this stuff is designed and integrated. I could have done a better job, I'm sure, but that was a lot of fun, but again, a whole lot of work, and to try to do it on a weekly basis is insane, as you know.
Oh yeah.
And so I tried briefly to keep it on a week, and then I tried 2 weeks, and then it fell to a month or so, and then I went, well, this is just a joke. Although I really enjoyed doing it. I miss kind of doing it, but I remember too, in your podcast when it first started, there was the whispering in the middle of the night because everyone was asleep, and it's not, it's hard to listen to that for very long, I think. And to be alone, it's very hard to do it because you don't know whether anyone likes it or is even down. I mean, you know whether people are downloading it, but you don't know what's going on.
Yeah, it's particularly challenging to do something by yourself, and I must admit, getting people like Mike and Rich on board it really changes the whole dynamic rather than doing something solo.
Yeah, I would say I think the best episode I did which was a ton of fun, was I got Russ Wakeland from the D6 generation and Troy McCauley to come back.
Yeah,
and we talked about the iPad and its effect on gaming right when the iPad was invented, right when it came out, and it was a really neat conversation to have. But it fills the time so much more easily, and you get different perspectives and voices, and it's much more interesting to listen to, I think.
I completely agree. I think Neil's podcasts have gone much better since me and Mike and Richard have joined in. We've had a certain class, I like to think.
I'm a purist. I've been listening to the show for so long. I'm still getting used to the idea that there are other people other than Neil. I mean, that their opinion's even worth listening to other than Neil Shuck's opinion.
Oh, my opinion is definitely not worth listening to. Anyway.
And
I'm just stepping away from this one.
I'm going to add. I'm ashamed I don't get to meet Mike Whitaker tonight, but I've been listening to the recent shows where you had Two Fat Lardies on, and they were talking about Ducks Britannium. Does he work for them, or is he writing things for them? Because he sounds a little bit in the bag for Ducks.
Mike, if you followed his blog over the last year or so, Mike has been gaming an awful lot of Ducks. In their club, they put together this campaign which they played for months, and Mike's written some stuff for the seasonal specials that Two Fat Lardies put out. So he's he's really sold on the game and knows an awful lot about it. So from that side of things, he was the best person to talk to Rich, because I like Ducks. I haven't played an awful lot of it. And so when we were talking about new expansion or what have you, it was just a case of, Mike, you know exactly,
right.
You know more about where Rich is coming from than I do. Ducks is, had Mike realised that we were talking about games other than what came out last year, when we did our end of year show, Ducks Britannium would have featured a whole lot more than what he did.
I noticed. He sounded kind of miffed at the end of that when you reminded him those were the rules.
He wasn't. He wasn't overly impressed or anything. I think he would have changed his. I think he would have changed his top five quite a bit. Never mind.
Well, that's okay.
He should have read the memo. There was an official memo went out.
I'm sure.
Well, I want to say official memo. I think we might have mailed it. Anyway, shall we get back onto the subject while you're here, Ken, which is Polyversal? Because this is
indeed.
You don't just want to talk about me. You don't just want to talk about me and my life for the last 20 years.
No, I've done that now.
Good.
Let's talk about Polyversal, because it really interests me. I like the idea behind it. So, can you give us a sort of brief sort of overview of what you want to do with Polyversal and sort of where you got the ideas from?
Well, yeah, the idea is really simple, and that is those of us who are in this hobby and have been for a long time pretty much know that if you're going to play, especially a historical war game, you have to get a rule set, then you have to hunt down miniatures from that period, from what could be anywhere from 1 to 20 manufacturers, depending on the period. I mean, I don't know how many manufacturers of 15 millimeter World War II tanks there are, but I'm guessing it's more than a half dozen. So to me, I've always, as I said, been interested in this 6 mil grand, large, what I think of as large scale, although everyone calls small scale. It's large scale because the scale of the war you're representing on the table, not because of the miniatures to me. But however you want to think of it, there are now, when I started playing, of course, there was Games Workshop, and that was it. You had to get 6 millimeter miniatures to play Epic or 8 millimeter, I guess, in real practice. But you know what I'm saying. From Games Workshop, and only from Games Workshop. If you wanted to play Space Marine at that time, or even now, you had to have Space Marine miniatures that represented the official Space Marines designed by Games Workshop, and they had to match the cards that came with the game, and you couldn't introduce anything to the game, which was fine, frankly, because the game had so many things for it. It was wonderful. I mean, Games Workshop made a huge variety of miniatures for that game, which now you're seeing released in 28 mil for $40K. I've had Imperial Knights in my collection for 20 years.
Yeah.
You all are going to get them this weekend, I guess. But nowadays, however, to different from the way Epic sort of that scale began. Well, as I said, after that, I was playing BattleTech, which of course has its own unique IP. And then Dirtside was a game that came out that was just rules, and you could use anything for it. The problem with Dirtside, well, I really like Dirtside, to be fair. The problem with it for someone new is if you don't know where to find 6 millimeter miniatures, you really don't know how to. It's basically, if you already have them, it's great because you can just adapt what you have to the game. So Polyversal came about in my mind as a solution to that, because what we want to do is leverage the talent in manufacturing miniatures out there with a rule set that will bring them all together. I do not want to make miniatures. Byron Collins, who is the owner of Collins Epic War Games, who is my publisher, does not want to make miniatures. We are not miniatures designers. Our goal is not to sell miniatures. And Games Workshop's stated goal, of course, is to manufacture miniatures. It's right there on their page. I mean, that's what they do. They are a manufacturer. And I think there are a lot of wonderful manufacturers, Games Workshop being probably chief among them. I mean, there's no doubt that they manufacture wonderful things. But in the 6 mil sci-fi world, there are some really, really talented manufacturers of miniatures out there. You've got Brigade Models, you've got Plasma Blast Games, you've got Micro World, you've got Steel Crown, Dark Realm. There's a whole lot of them out there now, and more coming. I mean, Troublemaker makes some things now. Onslaught Miniatures has been making some really, really nice looking stuff, although it's clearly meant as proxies for Epic. It's still very nice and not necessarily proxies for Epic. They're all out there. But unless you're me and you spend all of your time hunting the internet for new 6 millimeter miniatures you don't already own, which I admit is a shrinking world, you wouldn't know where to find that stuff. So Polyversal is the idea, and in fact, that's sort of where the name originated. Polyversal is like, I wanted to create a universal miniature game for 6 mil science fiction. And then I thought Polyversal just sounded cooler than universal, because you can play in any universe you want and then mix them all together. And so what we intend to do is we're going to make a really good rule set. We're going to make the best rule set we can. I have a lot of experience making. I've been designing games just for fun, certainly my whole life. Byron has already published several games, and we can talk about Collins Epic War Games some in a bit, because you should. If I guarantee, if you're not familiar with them, you probably should be. They are not a miniatures game designer yet. This is the first project he's wanted to take on in the miniatures realm, but he's published several really neat games. What we want to do is create a really good rule set that will work as a toolbox. One, it will include in the box set initially some miniatures from at least 5 different 6 millimeter miniatures manufacturers. And then you can create the armies. I'm writing some fluff, if you will, a storyline. You certainly don't have to follow it if you don't like it. If whatever. If you already want to play in the 40K universe, or if you want to play in the BattleTech universe, or some universe you've already made up, the Wars of Faltinian Succession, or whatever, you can adapt the miniatures in the box, or whatever miniatures you have. We're going to have a system to let you spec them out, just like Dirtside did, using our system, so that if you're already playing, no problem. If you're not, you've got it all in one place, and then you'll learn just from getting the box where to get more. We're not going to have every miniature Plasma Blast makes, for example. We can't. I mean, the game would cost $1,000. But that's the goal, is to give people sort of a taste of what's out there, with the agreement, of course, of all these companies, which has been really wonderful, and have a grand scale 6 mil war game. You'll play with 2 or 3 companies at least on a side. And so there'd be a fair number of tanks and infantry on the table. I mean, you could play it as small or as large as you want. I think it slows down past 5 companies on the table to the point where you might need several people. But
before we go into the rules, I mean, this is something that really interests me. Is, I mean, the normal route that you see with sort of games is you either get games designers who just write rules, then you get the manufacturers who basically make figures, either for a historical period or a sci-fi or fantasy period. Occasionally you get manufacturers who do both. They will produce a set of rules and figures which go along with those set of rules, and obviously they're usually quite lucrative. But what you're doing is something a bit different. You're writing a set of rules, a generic set of rules, but you're bringing in figures from multiple different manufacturers, almost in as official sort of figures. How did you manage to get them on board? Because was there much sort of were they all up for doing this, or were some of them not really sure?
Well, I will say, one, Byron Collins has handled that for me. I mean, Byron is my publisher. I'm designing the rule set for him. He's the one making these agreements. And I will say, what we have figured out, and what I told him when I pitched it to him, although he invited me to pitch it to him, what I think is different here, and we've gotten a lot of positive feedback from the manufacturers who have agreed to be part of this, is that the concept is really a benefit to both of us. That what we're going to produce is one, eyeballs onto their product, which might not otherwise exist. Just getting people aware of some of these companies is good. The game will produce artwork. We have, I don't know if you've seen them. There are pictures of them online. They're in obviously they're sort of prototypes, but we've made what we call combatant tiles. They're sort of the army cards of the game, and we intend to populate them with artwork. And so if, Brigade, for example, isn't going to pay an artist to make really nice artwork of all the tanks they've ever made. I mean, they have their own drawings they use to make them, probably, but they don't have, like, our cover art, for example. We have a guy named Bruno Wernick, who he's a film concept artist, actually, who he agreed to do this cover that we're using. And we got permission from Marios at Plasma Blast to use the designs of his tanks in the artwork. And so now we have beautiful artwork using tanks that you could have in the game. What Marios will have is artwork that he can use to promote the tanks that he makes and sells. And it's sort of a win-win, right? I mean, it's a way for him to sell more tanks that he makes without having to produce a rule set.
Yeah, I mean, it makes complete sense. I sort of wonder whether it's because it's 6 mil that people are sort of jumping on board with it. I wonder whether this sort of concept could actually happen in another scale.
I think it should. I mean, to me, it's kind of stupid that it hasn't. I've never. This is when I was younger, I never really jumped into historicals for a couple of reasons. One, I was frankly intimidated by the people who would argue that your Panzer variant H doesn't have the right number of plates on the side of it.
Good comment.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, I saw that on your blog. That's exactly the reason I didn't want to get into World War II gaming. Is that someone would say, well, that's the wrong shade of olive green to paint a Eighth Army, or whatever. I do not want to argue with you about whether the coats on my infantrymen are the right design for 1943 or not. I don't care about that. I don't really care about the muzzle velocity of various weapons in various wars. I mean, I find those things interesting sometimes. I've actually had to read about them in order to develop statistics for futuristic non-existent weapons, but that's not why I play war games, and I don't think that's why most people play war games. Some people clearly get excited about that. But the other reason, of course, is that it's almost impossible to figure out what the right, when you're brought up in the Games Workshop mentality, which is what one of your guests was talking about recently, you have it all there, and I know you've talked about this before, where it's all sort of served to you in sort of pre-digested blocks, and you don't know, if this isn't the official Eighth Army, then I don't know how to make an Eighth Army. I'm not going to go find orders of battle and all of that stuff. That was a little much for me as a teenager. Now I'm a little more patient with that kind of thing. But, I think it's the same even with science fiction and fantasy, although it's made up. It's intimidating now to, like, if you looked at Plasma Blast, I like this example because it's such a neat, they have these 3 lines, they're very discreet, and they're very nicely made, but they have no game. And so if you like science fiction and you like the look of their tanks, you would say, well, what are these for? I don't know. Why would I buy miniature tanks? They don't do anything. They're not part of any game. There's no BattleTech rules for them. Games Workshop will throw me out of their store for trying to use them. I don't know what to do with them. Well, it seems to me that's, unless you had a rule set, which makes no reference to that. I mean, Future War Commander did a good job of making lists for it, but it seems like if you had it all in one place, it's just that much easier for the gamer to get into the game.
I think that's key, Ken, essentially, I think most war gamers are fairly lazy.
Of course we are.
And, we like, and this is probably why the Flames of War model has taken off, and the Games Workshop model. We like to be able to go in and just buy a box with everything we need for a particular unit in it. Okay, there's some gamers who don't, and, fair use, and there's companies out there who will sell a blister of, 4 Napoleonic line infantry, and then you would sit down and work out how many packs of that you need to do your company.
Right.
Some people like doing that, but essentially most of us are quite lazy and we'd rather buy a box. So what you're trying to do here, I think, is absolutely wonderful. In fact, you're bringing in all of these manufacturers who are making some really good stuff. I've seen what Plasma Blast are doing. I've got some of the Dark Realm figures. But I bought them, and then, as you said, I didn't have any rules for them, and I couldn't use them in Epic, so I just, I basically threw them, baited them up, and then did nothing with them. So to be able to now have a generic game system that I can use lots of desperate, figures that I've got hanging around, and get them onto a table, for me is key. But logistically, are you going to sort of be producing sort of artwork that you'll then almost license out to these manufacturers and sort of say, these are the size of the unit boxes, you produce the boxes, you sell them, and, we can sell them on your behalf? Or how much are you going to get into the actual sort of selling of the product that these other manufacturers are going to make? Or are you just going to leave that all to them to do, and you just concentrate on the rules side?
I think we're going to leave a lot of that to them. I mean, I don't envision... I guess it depends on how it takes off. I mean, if 20,000 people sign up and we have a whole lot of money on the table, it might change things. But I suspect what I know we initially plan to do is make sort of a box set game for the main game, which will have some from each. And then I've been suggesting to Byron, for example, that one of the things we should do is have additional combatant tiles for units that aren't necessarily in the box, maybe 1 or 2 from each company, so that it gives people something to, maybe I would like this robot in my army. I can get those directly from Steel Crown, for example, or so I'm not going to turn Byron's company into a miniatures department store. The companies themselves, I do not think intend to make boxes that are called polyversal units. What I think we intend to do as expansions, for example, if we're lucky enough to make expansions, would be to create sets that you would order from Colin's Epic War Games that included, I mean, as I would see it, I think what we would do is make up units that either were in the fiction that I'm writing or generic enough that it wouldn't matter, that included the tanks that Brigade makes, for example. And so you'd have a box that had all the tiles that represent all the platoons you could make with the type of tanks that Brigade makes. And then you'd have to go to Brigade and buy the tanks. Now, I don't know if it depends, I guess, on how much funding we get in the Kickstarter and how successful it is as a business model. It may be that when we make those expansions, we'll get Brigade to send us 1,000 of each of those tanks, and we'll make box sets with the cards and the tanks in them. I think that would be better, although cost-wise, the idea of shipping them to the United States and then back to the UK to the customer might not make sense. So that's something I think Byron is thinking about, but that's down the road a bit.
I think someone needs to do it, but I don't know who. I mean, it might be a case of if each unit is going to have a card, as you say. I mean, we haven't talked about the mechanic yet, so we'll come on to those in a second. But it sounds like, from what you're saying, that each type of unit will have a card which will have its stats on it.
Right.
Maybe it will be just a case of you turn around to somebody like Brigade or to Puzzle Bars and say, look, from your range, we'll produce these cards, you buy them off us, package them up, and then you sell them.
Right.
So at least then the customer knows that he can go to, say I want to do an army that's based on Brigade models because they're UK and they're supposed to be cheap. It means that I can go to them and say, right, give me X number of units of these, and it'll arrive with the models and the cards included. So it's there. It's ready to use. All I've got to paint the things, or in my case, all I've got to do is put them into a cupboard and leave them there for 5 years until I get around to painting them. But it's that sort of tie-in of the miniatures to the product you need to play the game. I think is key. And if you separate that,
I completely agree.
Yeah. All right.
I think that would make sense. I like that. I don't know. Again, it depends on how much demand there is, I think, entirely.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you either do it as product. I'm kind of guessing that Collins, because they're coming from the background of being able to produce printed material, that they will probably be able to produce these cards a lot more efficiently and a lot cheaper than a small manufacturer could. So maybe that's one strength. Or otherwise, maybe you do as a PDF, or something that some way that you can get the whole thing together. I think would be key to its success, because games and models, that are linked do sell well. I mean, we've seen this with Saga. It's you put a Saga banner onto a blister and it flies out because people see it as being the official thing.
Oh, I think that's true, and I will add. Well, there are two thoughts there, but the one I wanted to add on to is what I didn't mention is, of course, the game. I mean, I'm holding my draft rulebook in my hand. It's currently sitting at about 50-some pages printed, so I don't know what that works out to once I add all the pictures and the examples and things to it. But there's a big chunk of this book that is how to design your own tile. Basically how to design your own unit. Like if you already have. If you have manufacturers we don't support yet or don't support us or whatever, for example, if you have Games Workshop miniatures, as you know, I cannot and will not make, tiles for Games Workshop miniatures because that they won't let me, and that's just not going to happen. So, but you're going to look. Let's face it, people are going to want that. I know that. I mean, I have a whole stack of Warlord Titans I want to see put the smackdown on modern tanks. It's easy to create your own. One of the things we'd like to be able to do from the Kickstarter is make an app, or at least a web-based app, that will let you just type it in, click some boxes, and it'll print one out for you, so you can have your own as well. But, ideally, I agree with you. It would be best for us to make art, have the official stats, have it all go with the miniatures, at least either get it to the miniature manufacturers for them to put alongside. If you want to add an extra couple of dollars to your miniatures order, they'll throw in the cards. Yeah. That would be great. And I think we're not there in the process yet, but that would be good.
Okay, that all sounds good. I mean, like I say, with the sort of the tie into Epic, which obviously I'm really interested in, because I've got lots of it.
Yeah, most people who already play 6 mil probably do, right?
Yeah, but obviously you've got to be really careful, because you can't sell something that uses their IP. You could probably give it away in the same way that NetEpic does, because that has been shut down in about 10 years. So
that is interesting. Well, I will add, I'm currently a bankruptcy lawyer, but prior to that, I practiced intellectual property law at a large law firm. I know a fair amount about this. I followed the Chapter House GW legal case pretty closely.
Oh, okay.
But I will also add, if you look carefully, if you have Future War Commander, if you've ever played it,
I played that.
Somewhere in that rule book, I think it's in the rule book. It might be on his website. The author points out pretty clearly that he tried to get permission from Games Workshop directly to make army lists that actually say Space Marine and Tau and Tyranid. But of course, those are all registered trademarks of GW. And they not only told him he couldn't, but what they did say was you can make the rule book, and the rule book has generic names of armies that are clearly Games Workshop armies.
Yeah.
But if you didn't know anything about Games Workshop, you would never know that. And on his website, he is allowed to list the proxies for all of those things in his rulebook. So there's it's like a PDF you can download, and it tells you that when the rulebook refers to this unit, it's actually referring to a Rhino or a Land Raider. And so actually in my copy, I have taken a Sharpie and written in all of the official GW names, which I'm sure other people have done, but that's how he got around it.
No, I haven't done that either.
I think he did it with permission.
I think it comes down to you're not allowed to sell anything that uses their IP or, pictures of their product, but I think you're allowed to give stuff away. And I think that's how NetEpic, I don't know if you ever looked at NetEpic.
Oh, I've played NetEpic. Yeah, I'm a big fan.
It's a good game, isn't it? Yeah. But that's got around it because it's a free product. So anyway, but
yes,
you're the lawyer,
no.
so
there's a complicated answer to that. Partially that the reason they probably haven't been sued by Games Workshop is that it's free. In other words, there's nothing to get. But I don't think that makes it strictly legal in the straightest legal sense. I'm not sure it's appropriate for them to be doing that, but they've been doing it for years, and it's up to Games Workshop to stop them, and I don't think it intends to.
But for yourself as a manufacturer of a set of rules, you legally can't turn around and say, my set of rules, here are the stats to do Epic using my set of rules, because they will just jump all over you. It can be implied, I suppose, but as you say, you're better off going down the route of having manufacturers who want to work with you,
right?
And basically support them.
Make no mistake, if Games Workshop calls me and says, we want you to make Polyversal stats for all of the Games Workshop miniatures that we make or plan to make in 6 mil, I will do it. Because I'd be stupid not to.
Yes.
And but I don't think that call's coming.
No, I kind of agree with that. Shall we have a bit of a chat about the actual rule mechanics themselves?
Oh, well, first off, yeah. I mean, you made a statement that you're sat there with a 56-page rulebook in your hand.
Did you not get a copy?
I don't think I did, actually.
No, Byron won't let me send them out yet.
That's fine.
And it's not ready for prime time, but it exists. It's not I know we are criticized daily for how little we tell people on our website, but that's not because we're not working.
Well, yeah. I think I say sometimes in this age of disclosure and people wanting to find out stuff ASAP, actually to turn around and go, well, actually, we're not ready to do that yet. That's perfectly fine, but people have just got to get used to it.
It is. It's hard.
Yeah, and some people just can't cope with that. The fact that surely it should be a case of you should be telling us everything as soon as you got it, and that's not necessarily the best thing to do, especially from your point of view, is it?
No, it's not for a couple of reasons. One, it will change. I mean, that's the biggest one. Is if I posted today the way the rules work, I think 99% of it will be the same when the book comes out. But I guarantee you, someone will email us in the middle of a game and say, "Well, you said that a tank could do this, and now it can't, and I don't know why." And I don't need that.
Okay, so we have this 56-page rulebook, which you have in front of you and we don't.
Sorry.
How long did it take you to actually get to that point?
The honest answer to that is I think it's probably been 7 years. It may be longer than that, but that's not a fair statement because, of course, I have a job and a wife and a family, and that is not Polyversal. And so this is the product of years of doing things at night and thinking about the game and working on it for fun, and then finally getting the nerve to let other people play it, and then taking it to conventions and getting people to play it. And I think that's the way lots of games eventually get designed.
Yeah.
But it's been sort of running around in my head since, well, I don't know now. I'm not sure how far back the earliest drafts go, but it's easily 7 or 8 years, and it's probably more than that.
Okay, and so I assume we're up to kind of draft 327 Mark 2.
I stopped counting. I just changed the date on the front of the draft now. The current draft is February 25th, 2014, but I have printouts at home that go back years. And the process has been very, very good. And what's really been neat, actually, so quick story about how this got to be where I am now is I ran the game. We have a number of local gaming conventions run by my old wargaming club called the Williamsburg Muster and Guns of August, which are both held in Williamsburg, Virginia. And they're relatively small local conventions, a lot of historicals, there's a big Flames of War tournament, not much fantasy and science fiction, although I have run dystopian wars there, and a friend of mine has his own sort of homebrew giant sci-fi rules called Quickfire that he runs. And so I ran the game, being a member of the club, the early days of the convention, we were paranoid that people wouldn't set up games. We didn't know how many people would come. We didn't know how many games would be put on. And so they said, we need games. And I said, well, I've got this game. I'll put it on. Thinking, if it works, it works. If it doesn't, we'll just get a beer and it won't be that big a deal. Well, it worked pretty well. And then I brought it back the next convention, and I built a bunch of terrain for it, including what has come to be known as Mr. Teleporter, which is a giant teleport station that I designed using one of those like glowing plasma discs.
Oh, yeah.
And I built it into what was an old coffee maker, so that the base of it was the glowing teleport part, and the top of it looked like it was the top of the teleporter, and so tanks would materialize on it and roll off in the middle of the battle. And that became like a center of folk. Like everyone came to look at this thing. It's amazing. If you just put a glowing disc in the middle of your war game, everyone will come look at it. It's a point for those of you who run games at conventions. And Byron was one of those people, and he saw the game. He saw people enjoying it. People were asking me about it. And so he invited me to offer, to run it for him, and he really liked it, and he thought he could publish it. And so I said, well, I hadn't really thought about publishing it, but I've always wanted to publish a game. And so I said I would write it. Because at that point, it was a series of outlines and charts that I had made for myself to have to run it. I did a lot of winging it, as people who run games do. Mm-hmm. And I knew how it worked, but I hadn't really written it all out. It's one thing to know how your game works enough to get people to play it. It's another thing to sit down and write it down so that if you mailed it to someone who's never seen you before, they could play it.
That is hard, yeah.
That's where I am now. I mean, it's like I read it and I reread it and I think, I think this makes sense. It makes sense to me, but I wrote it, so.
So, what can you tell us about the game?
Well,
if anything?
I can tell you pretty much a lot. So, I guess you want to know sort of how it works, or how does it play, or.
Yeah,
That sounds good to you.
Yeah, exactly.
We know company size, or multiple company size, obviously with some support. So we're looking at units? Will units move and fire together, or are you going to go for the sort of, they will move singly and fire singly sort of
Right.
effect?
Yes.
It's that sort of level.
Right. Okay. So the first thing you do, of course, is build your army using the cards rather than a list. So the nice thing about the cards is they're hexagonal, and you can lay out your army. Your commander goes in the middle, and there'll be a card for a commander. Your commander is very important because he's your commander. Each commander commands what is effectively a company. They can command up to 6 extra units that naturally fit around the hexagon, if you can imagine that. You just put the tiles down. Anything that surrounds the commander is within his unit. Well, that's not the right word. Unit's a very specific term. Each card is a unit. It'll have 3 tanks or 1 giant robot or 10 infantry stands or that kind of thing. The whole thing is what we call a battle group in this game. But so the commander has a command range in the game based on how effective he is, and I'll get to effectiveness. Effectiveness is a very important part of this game. It makes it very different than several other games. But everyone begins, well, the easiest way to play would be everyone begins with the most effectiveness, the sort of morale, and they're measured by dice types. And so this game uses D4, D6, D8, D10, and D12. And D12 is the best and D4 is the worst. And so everything begins at let's assume everything begins at a D12 effectiveness. Your scenarios might change, but if your commander has a D12 effectiveness, he has a 24-inch command radius. So his battle group, all the other people in his battle group, have to remain within that distance from him if they want to be able to get orders. It doesn't make them ineffective if they don't, but the ability to command them will change. So you can build a couple of groups of those. A good game is probably 3 sets of those. You can certainly do more. I'm sure people will. I'd like to do more, but it is, you're adding time to the game. It depends on how much time and space you have. You lay all that out. So then you have your setup, which is fairly basic, just like any other game. I mean, I might make some special rules for scenarios, but, you're on one side of the table. I'm on, let's assume, a basic meeting engagement. And then the first, in each turn, there's a sequence. And the first thing, of course, you do is you issue orders. In order for your units to get orders, they have to be within this command radius that I was talking about. So at the beginning, that's no problem. Later on, 2 things will change that. One, your commander's effectiveness will degrade. And so he may drop to D6, which means his command radius is now only 12 inches. So people outside of that radius will be outside of the command range, and they won't be able to get orders. They may have moved too far. That kind of people may be killed in between. There may be jamming, in effect, that puts people out of command range because you can't trace a line through the jamming area. There's some special things you can do. The orders, if you're familiar with Epic, which it sounds like certainly Mike is, you give each unit orders by putting a counter which will have face down on the table. And unlike Epic, which has 3 orders, we have quite a few. I think it's 8 now. We keep proposing new ones to see if we like them, but right now I'm stuck at about 8. And they're pretty basic stuff. I mean, you have Advance, which is you can move and shoot. That's the one you're going to use most of the time. You've got Assault, which is, charging people. You get a bonus to your movement. There's Call for Fire, which is if you have a unit that has line of sight on an enemy unit, it can call fire down on it from another unit that's capable of indirect fire. Or I guess if you have off-board artillery, you could do that as well, or orbital or something. There's Defend, which allows a unit to protect itself. If it thinks it's going to get charged, it gains a bonus. It's basically like digging in to protect itself. There's Fire for Effect, which gives a targeting bonus to a unit. There's Overwatch, which is exactly like it is in most other games. It lets you interrupt your opponent's movement to shoot. There's a Rally Order to help repair broken effectiveness and remove stress, which is something that will accumulate during the game. There's a Redeployment Order, which allows you to move your unit. It's sort of like charging but you can't. It's not for charging. It's for moving units further than they would be able to move. Basically, it's like running.
Okay.
And then there's a fallback, which is an order, but it's the result of failing certain tests, which requires you to move back or move into cover, that sort of thing. Once you put the orders down, then you check for initiative among the various commanders. And so first thing you do is each player decides which of their commanders they want to use initiative for. So you then roll that commander's effectiveness die, which I was talking about before. The high roll gets to activate that commander's company or battle group. A number of activations equal to the difference between those rolls. So this is where it's neither I go, you go, nor whatever the alternative. It's sort of its own thing. It's a little bit I go, you go, but it's variable. So if your commander has a D12 and my commander has a D6, you might get 6 activations out of that. And you might, usually that doesn't happen because they're relatively close together most of the time, but it could happen.
Yeah.
Just like in real war, which is something I like. I was enjoying the last guest from Two Fat Lardies because I'm a big fan of this. I'm not a big fan of the idea that units always move 6 inches and you always know that it's your turn and all of that. This game makes you adapt, which I'm a big fan of.
Yeah.
Not everyone is, I recognize that, but people who have played it really enjoy that about it. So once you get these activations, you can choose which of the units in that commander's command can activate. And so you activate the number that you're allowed, and they can perform the orders that they were given, which is, I was describing, and then you roll again. So once if you got 3 activations, you make your 3 activations, and then you roll again. You can choose a different commander to roll for. You can use the same one. It doesn't matter. You just can't keep moving the same unit every time. Every unit gets 1 activation. Eventually, it will come down to, well, I have guys left and you don't, so I'll have to activate them. But what it does is it keeps it variable. Does that make sense? Or
Yeah, I think I get that. So it sounds like you're using the effectiveness of the commander to simulate the morale status of the battle group.
Well, yes and no. Maybe I should have gone over the stats for everybody, but every single unit has its own effectiveness. And they're independent of one another. You're
okay. Yeah.
Every single unit has one. One platoon could be at very high morale, and the platoon right next to it could be at very poor morale over the course of the game. It's morale evolves because as units get attacked, they take, among other things, they take stress, which is tracked. I've been using little black puffballs. You could use dice. You could use. We may make counters. I haven't finalized how we're going to track it in the game. But stress is kind of a broad concept for chaos over the course of battle. And as units take stress, at the end of the turn, if they're carrying 2 stress, at the end of the whole round, when you're sort of tidying up at the end of a round, every unit that has at least 2 stress on it drops 1 effectiveness rating from D12 to D10, D10 to D8. If it's at D4 and it drops, it just disbands. And what you'll find is the larger units that are very hard to kill can often be dealt with by just keeping them harassed with stress, because they'll have to focus on. You can imagine that it's like the crew running around repairing the thing, or like trying to plug holes in it, or just freaking out because they're getting pummeled with stuff, but they're not necessarily being killed. There's one of the hardest things about a game like this is that you're talking about a range of things that include human beings with pistols to 40-meter tall robots that could level cities, and so it's very hard to keep all of that in one spectrum when you're making a rule set without getting into real record keeping. And I didn't want it to become BattleTech where you're keeping track of all kinds of systems and ammunition, but I didn't want it to just be, well, they're dead too. Oh well, that is, that's really aggravating to people. I've played games where that happens, and you put out your giant 1,000-point monster robot, and it's taken down in one turn. It is possible. I won't really. We'll get feedback. People will say, "You said that can never happen." Well, it can happen, but it's really unlikely. But what can happen is that it can accumulate a whole lot of stress, and it'll survive 4 or 5 turns, but then it'll just disappear because it will become completely combat ineffective.
That's a nice mechanic. You're using that sort of variable, using the dice to sort of track the unit's effectiveness, and almost become like a breakpoint is a nice clean mechanic. I'm kind of guessing that the individual units in the battle group, as they start to become less effective, that's going to have a knock-on effect to the commander, or is the commander's effectiveness sort of separate and that has to be taken down by attack to the commander?
Yeah, as of right now, it's all separate right now. I've thought through that. I think it would become convoluted if I tried to intertwine them. It would be a lot to try to figure out, I think. But what happens is the effectiveness die is used a lot in this game, and you'll see when I get in. The way attacks work in this game are different than most other games. In fact, they're inspired by a game called Silent Death. I don't know if either of you have played that. It's an older game that you don't see played much anymore, but
I've got the rules.
Well, you're like me, right? You probably have the rules to everything, but whether you've actually read and played them is a whole other question.
I've read them. I don't think I've ever got around to playing them.
Well,
I've just read them a couple of times.
I will say, Silent Death is a brilliant. That's a word I've used too much already, but it is absolutely a stunning rule set for this reason. What they did in Silent Death is they made it so that when you attack something, you roll 3 dice, and you add the numbers together to determine whether you hit it. And if you're, the target, if you have to roll a 10 and you add up the 3 dice you rolled and you roll a 12, then you hit it. Then to figure out whether you damaged it, instead of rolling again or rolling a counter roll or anything, you use the same 3 dice without touching them. And depending on the type of weapon you have, you determine whether you cause, like if your weapon causes high damage, you use the highest of the 3 dice that you rolled, and that's how much damage it caused. If it causes low damage, you use the lowest of the 3 dice that you rolled. If you rolled all 3 of the same number, they add together. And in Silent Death, you're flying spaceships, and so you mark off boxes. And so if you rolled 3 8s, you mark off 24 boxes instead of 8. Which usually would destroy a spaceship. It's highly unlikely, but it happens. And then as you mark off the boxes, different things go wrong inside your spaceship. It's a very elegant system. It takes a little. You got to play through a turn or two to get used to it. But that is the underlying inspiration for the way I do combat resolution in this game. Because what I did here was take that idea. I had seen it adapted actually in, I think it was. Is it War Games Illustrated? I think I wrote to you about this, Neil. A while back, There was an article called Low Level Hell. I mean, like 15 years ago back, by the South London Warlords. It was a Vietnam rule set that they had made using Silent Death as the inspiration. And that's where I first got the idea that you could do that. Like, I never really thought about adapting mechanics in that way because they're so different. I mean, Vietnam and spaceship combat are so completely different.
It's just a tad, yes.
But actually, I mean, it was very clever because helicopters over Vietnam work pretty much the same way as 2-dimensional hex-based spaceship combat because it wasn't a 3D spaceship combat game. I mean, there was a nod to it, but not much of that. And really, when you think about it, low-level helicopter combat over Vietnam isn't much different, except that they're fixed, they're VC on the ground shooting up at you. But basically, it was similar, and so they did a good job of adapting the rules. And I remember thinking at the time, well, this is like I would have never thought to do that, and then it sort of was in the back of my head. So when I started thinking about how to improve Dirtside, which is, let's be honest, what I think this is, and I love Dirtside, but this is an evolution of that. That mechanic stuck in my head because what I really don't like about a lot of games is you roll to hit, then you have to roll to block, then you have to roll for your armor, or you roll to damage, and then you roll for your armor, and by the time you've done that, you've made like 4 die rolls to determine that nothing happened. Well, you shouldn't have to do that. It seems like you could just reduce all that mathematically into 1 die roll.
Yeah.
And they had already done it, so I didn't have to figure that out. But I've expanded it to make it more useful for this type of game. And what I did was, so to roll to attack in this game, it's the same thing, but it depends on which dice you choose. Well, you don't get to choose, but it depends on which dice you use when you roll. And so when you're firing a weapon at someone in Polyversal, any weapon, a laser, any direct fire weapon, you roll a targeting die, which is just the targeting. It's basically the quality of targeting system your unit has. It averages out to a D8. That's sort of the basic, computer inside of a tank. A person with no training would be like a D4, and some kind of super advanced networked computer system would be a D12. You roll that die. You roll the current effectiveness die of the unit, which, as I said before, changes during the course of the game. And then you roll 1 die that's unique to the type of weapon you're firing. So each weapon has an anti-personnel and anti-vehicle die. So if you're firing in a tank, you use the vehicle one. If you're firing in a person, you use the person one. Those are the 3 dice you roll. You roll those 3 dice to hit. If that number is greater than the target's evasion stat, the 2 hit number, you hit it. And then you do, like I said before, if the weapon's damage type is high, then you use the highest of those numbers to determine how much damage you caused. If it's low, you use the lowest. And then there are 2 classes of medium. Because it's 3 dice, sometimes you could roll 2 of one number and 1 of another, and then there would be no middle number. You see what I mean? If you rolled 1 5 and 2 3s, there's no 4 in there. So there's medium 2 and then there's medium 1. So that just means you choose, whether it's the 2 dice or the 1 die. And if it's the 2, then you add them together. You compare the damage number on the stat card. There's a little chart at the bottom that says, if you caused 1 to 3 damage, it hits the armor. If you cause 4 to 5, it's stress. If you caused 6, it's a weapon that's destroyed. If you cause 7 or more, the whole tank is destroyed. That kind of thing. All of those charts are worked out so that when you build a unit in the game, you can figure out how those charts are filled in. And then the game will, of course, be supplied with all the ones. You don't have to do that. You can use the ones in the game. And so that's basically how it works. I don't know if that... I've been talking a bit. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's how it's going to work.
Yeah, no, that does make sense. I mean, how are you thinking of actually tracking the effectiveness die? Because obviously that's going to be changing for the units as they start to degrade. Are you going to have the cards that you can write on them and sort of say, the current dice, or is it you're going to have a little counter you're going to put on the card or next to unit, or...
Right. It's funny. This becomes the subject of some personal preference that people hold very strongly. I've actually been using these little colored puffballs when I was testing the game. You can buy them at like a hobby shop. And the dice in the game are color-coded. So D4 is blue, D6 is green, D8 is yellow, D10 is orange, and D12 is red. The game will ship with 3 of each. They'll all be those colors. And then in the rules and on the cards...
I'm liking this more and more. Obviously picking up on the different dice mechanics as far as different polyhedral dice, and then keying that in with each dice is a key colour and that sort of thing. It's starting to tick a lot more boxes.
Yeah, well, good. I will say, my before I went to law school, I studied cognitive science, and one of the things that I am a big fan of is design helping. War games are really bad at just throwing out a whole lot of information at you, and I've read so many criticisms lately of war game rules that are like, this game would be really cool if I didn't have to flip like 50 times through the book to find what I wanted. So I've tried. I think a lot of the design here is streamlining it down to, I see a color, it's red. I know that I'll pick up the red die now, and it's like, and I've seen this happen. Like I made my own little cards on there's a computer program you can download called Nandeck. You have to program it, but you can make your own stat card programmer using it. And I made my own sort of prototypes. And when I had those, instead of just index cards with numbers on them, and I put those in front of people with the colors and everything, within a turn, they weren't asking me anymore. They were just picking it up and going to it. And that's when I knew the design was working. Because it is a lot to take on reading. Yeah. But when you can streamline it with colors and the systems that are basically the same, I've tried to make the systems so that the system for direct fire is pretty much the same as the one for indirect fire, with one or two changes that aren't dramatic. I didn't want to have to go to a whole completely new concept for indirect fire, because it's like learning a whole new thing. Your brain just doesn't do that very well, and it's not worth the extra work most of the time in a game, certainly.
It does sound very interesting. And as you say, being able to, it's what Rich Clark says all the time, isn't it? It's moving the game away from the rules, isn't it? It's not letting the rules dominate the game.
Yeah, that's the idea.
Okay.
Yeah, it does sound very intuitive. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Okay. I think you were going to explain. Right. So you've been obviously talking about indicators of how what dice units are, and
oh, right.
And we were talking about, or at least we asked the question. You said, "Oh yeah, I'll come back to that." about I know we were talking about how units degrade, but originally you were also talking about the commander being very key to the way your battle group runs, and also they're talking about the way that a commander degrades during the game. How does that happen?
Well, first of all, one thing I forgot to mention, Mike asked how you would track where the dice go, and either you can either put, I'm certain there will be counters of some kind, so we can either you can put them on the table next to the tanks, and it'll just be a little yellow or red or orange, whatever. I've actually designed one that you can just rotate like a little pentagon of the different colors. I don't know whether Byron will go for that or not. We haven't finalized the design of the counter, but you can either put it on the board next to the models, or you can put it on your card. If you have a lot of different units, it's easy to keep track of just by looking down at the card. But if you had a whole army of all the same tank platoon type, it would be kind of tricky, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
So the commander degrades in the same way as anyone else. He'll take stress from being fired at. So as he degrades, in addition to the effectiveness of any attacks he makes, which probably won't be but so many, the range of his command radius will shrink. Now, there are some rules about just targeting a commander, because it's very bad if your commander dies. And in some scenarios, that's the whole point, is to defeat your enemy's commanders by destroying them. So if you lose a commander, the ability to get orders goes away. There's some real problems. But what happens is, if you're outside of the command radius of your commander, you can still do things. So you don't just become like, we're going to stand here and get killed. What happens is you have to keep using the same orders you last got, because you don't know to change your orders. You're still doing what you were told to do, because no one's told you not to do anything differently. And so if the last order you sent out was to be on Overwatch, that unit will stay on Overwatch, but it will have to make rolls to perform. So, and this has changed a bit lately, so I'm cheating by looking down at what we've written. I've played it so many different ways, testing it, that I can no longer remember all the details of how it works. But what basically happens is, if you're within command range, you get new orders and you perform them no problem. If you're outside of command range, you have to, like when I was talking about giving out the activations to the units in your commander's command range, you have to activate the units within command range first over the course of the turn. Then you get to the ones who are outside of command. And they still get a turn, but you have to roll a die to see whether they'll do what they're told or whether they'll fall back. If they fail to roll, which is I can't remember now. I think you roll the effect. Isn't this funny, right? I'm writing the thing and I don't remember. I know you don't remember. You basically you make a roll. If they fail to roll, they have to fall back, which basically means they'll move towards cover and towards their commander, and away from the enemy. If all of that is possible. If not, they're going to end up getting sort of swept up probably. But that's the main effect of having your commander degrade, is that his command range will shrink, and so your ability to do what you want will require you to bring your guys closer together, which may not always be good, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Will you have some rules in there? I mean, I'm sort of visualizing, as soon as you said that you're going to have the hex card for the commander, and that's going to be surrounded by the 6 units that he can have in his battle group. And I was sort of just visualizing then, there must be some way of actually pulling in the morale of those units to almost affect the morale of the commander. But I was wondering, when you activate your commanders, when you activate a battle group and you say you've got 3 orders you can give out, and as you say, you've got to give the orders to the units that are closest or within the command range of the commander. Could you, for example, give 2 orders to units that are close by, and then move your commander, which then allows him to give an order to a unit that's perhaps isolated?
Well, actually, yeah. Strictly speaking, you're not. Remember, the orders were already given to them. What you're doing is activating them.
Activate them, yes. Sorry.
But yes, and I'm glad you said that, because you, one, have vindicated a thought I hoped people would just figure out without me having to write, and 2, you've saved me from having to put it in some kind of. You just made me feel better about it, because it's immediately what I thought. Yes, what you do is, if you've got a unit, like if you send a forward observer way out front, and he's hiding in the woods somewhere, but he's now outside of your command range, and so can't get the order to call for fire, for example, which would make him totally useless. What you do is you use, and you got 2 activations, let's say. You use one activation to put down some fire from a tank platoon that's up front, because they're within command range. Then you use one of your activations on your commander, and you use him. Remember, he's a unit too, and so you move him forward. And then the next time you get to roll, that forward observer will be within your command radius, and it's fine. Now, you may have left some people behind you, but hopefully you've already gotten them the orders they need. Does that make sense? I think you've hit on exactly. Yes, you get it. Yeah. I think.
Yeah, it's not just seeing that a commander's been a static object and the units move around him. It's the movement of the commander and the units in unison.
Right.
And whilst, as you say, whilst some of them will be out of command range some of the time, I mean, you can keep everything really tightly coupled if you wanted to, but that's going to make make your battle group a very static, probably easy to target object.
And it's interesting. This came up in a conversation I had. A good friend of mine who's actually played the game. His name's Mike Martin. He's in the Army. He's an actual officer in the United States Army. He was a cavalry officer in a tank in the Gulf, the second Gulf War. I hope he doesn't mind me saying that. And he and I had talked at some point about what a commander's role on the battlefield is. I used to bounce a lot of questions off of him. And one of the things we were talking about was how a lot of games in this genre like to imagine the commander in this like super heavy, giant rolling building that's like moves a quarter of an inch every 2 turns, and has 4 foot thick armor and all of that kind of stuff, and a bunch of radar dishes on top, and it's like totally impenetrable in the fluff, and then when you play the game it dies in like 2 turns because they fire every missile they have at it. In reality, he was saying that he would rather be in like a tiny helicopter over the battlefield than he would in a giant tank somewhere behind the battlefield, because you really need to be up there with your guys. I mean, you need to know what's going on. You can't do it from a fortress, I mean, obviously, overall you can. I mean, that's how wars are fought. But if you're the one telling the tanks where to go and who to fire at directly, you need to be there. And so he was saying if he designed an army for this game, he would much rather see an army that had a commander in a smaller vehicle that was maneuverable than some super giant fortress that just sat in the back of the lines and lobbed missiles every once in a while.
I kind of depends really on the role of the commander. I mean, you could almost turn around, because it's sort of sci-fi, you could almost turn around and say the player is the commander who's up in orbit somewhere looking down, and then below him he's got his lieutenants, each commanding a certain area, and he's feeding commands down to that lieutenant to go and do something, but it's the guy on the ground who's basically got to get his ass up to the units to keep them all motivated and moving.
Right, and that's right. I mean, in this game, these commanders are basically, like company commanders. I guess they would be captains probably in the army, and the player is the overall. I always get the term brigade and battalion confused, but I assume they would be battalion commanders. You're in charge of a group of companies, each of which has its own commander, which is represented on the table. The player, you're right, is probably the battalion commander who told the captains, "This is what you have to do today. Go take this town. I don't care how you do it." But they're the ones who have to figure out how you have to do it.
But it's also really interesting.
Very much so.
Yeah.
That's a good sign. I like that.
Okay, so you told us something of how the mechanics are going to work, and obviously we've been talking about your hopes about using various different manufacturers' models and bringing everything together. Now, obviously, outside of all this, and what up front we happen to mention that wonderful current buzzword Kickstarter. What is the plan to bring all this together and bring this game to market?
Well, I'm very fortunate that Byron Collins wants to publish this game, and in several respects. One, Byron has already published a number of games, and most recently on Kickstarter. He's had 2 or 3 Kickstarters with Collins Epic War Games for a really neat little card game. If you haven't tried it, I actually...
That's Spearhead 1943, yeah?
Spearpoint, I think it is. But yes,
Spearpoint
1943 is a fun filler card. I think filler is a fair word. He might not... Well, with the expansion, it's probably not a filler, but with the main game, it's an easy little card game to play. One deck is German, one deck is the United States. It's Western Front, World War II. You have a bunch of tanks and crews and planes, and you build a hand. You build your own little deck out of the whole deck, and then you fight battles against each other by drawing cards and putting them down on the table, and then rolling for the battles. And he did it all himself. He put it all up on Kickstarter. He got a nice project together. He published, it's really nicely done. The artwork is he's selected all the artwork in that from archive footage, so that it's all very authentic. And he didn't have to use artists. I mean, it's all government-owned property, so you can use government pictures for whatever you want. They're public record. But he actually went through all of the national archives. He went up to D.C. here in America. He got stuff from German archives from a colleague. He got a wonderful artist named Mark von Marshall to design the cover art and the counters and everything, and he really did a good job putting it together. And then he recently did an expansion for it with a map that has a bunch of tiles you lay onto it, and then the game plays almost like a small miniatures game. I mean, you could play it with miniatures actually, with 15 mil, using it's like on grid squares, and you can put the cards onto the squares. There's like a road scenario or like a little town. I mean, there's various scenarios. There's one with a wrecked Panzer that you have to capture, or try to get up to. And it's very abstract, but it's really neat, and it's unlike most card games you've ever played. It's very clever. And I was really impressed with how he did that. And I personally actually helped him kit out the boxes for one of the expansions. I went to his house and we filled boxes for a weekend. But he is an impressive guy who really loves. He wants to be a publisher more than he wants to be a designer. I mean, he likes designing, but I think his goal has always been to get people on board with their designs. And so I'm actually the first one he's taken a chance on in that respect. There's another guy working on a submarine game. It's, I think, a solitaire board game involving the Pacific submarine campaign, but that's earlier in the process than I am with this. But he knows how to get things printed. He has the contacts. He's written a number of great columns on Board Game Geek and some other blogs about what it's like to be a small publisher in this business and what you have to do and how you have to get out there and do it. And he does. I mean, he goes to the shows. He's going to the Gamma Trade Show in just a few weeks. I'm sure he's going to want some stuff from me to take. He goes every year. He's been to Origins. He goes to local conventions. He puts a whole lot of time into this. And like me, he has a day job and a family. So, but what he also has is the experience, and that's the Kickstarter experience that he has makes me think he knows what he's doing. And it's pretty clear to me he's learned. I mean, he had, admittedly, and I think he's clearly not ashamed of this because he's been writing about it. His recent expansion initially failed on Kickstarter, and he re-kickstarted it. And he learned so much from just doing this. And this is what I think the genius of Kickstarter is, although it's sometimes criticized. If you fail on Kickstarter, it's like free feedback. I mean, you already know. Like, if no one wants to buy your product, you haven't invested $100,000 into printing it, for example.
Yeah.
And if people are interested in it, you'll be able to gauge what level of interest they have, where they like. I mean, people are pretty unabashed about saying what they like and don't like about things on Kickstarter. You know, you can't listen to all of them, but you have to, or you can't follow all of their advice, but you have to listen to all of them, I think. And you can really learn a lot that way. And so we intend to put this up on Kickstarter as a boxed game that includes the miniatures from other manufacturers, the rules, the counters, the cards. I'm sure there will be levels that involve, you know, neat little things we can do depending on, you know, how much funding we get. I think the app will be a stretch goal of some degree because I know that getting programmers on board will cost money. Yeah. But, you know, the money, of course, will be, we need the artwork, which he's actually quite talented. He's done some really neat line drawings, like schematic almost looking drawings of some of the miniatures that we have, just for fun to see whether they were good enough, and I frankly think they are. That's, of course, time, but it's not money, and we have some time that we can use for that. But we have artists who are much more talented than us on the list. Bruno Wernick, who did our cover art, is extraordinary and is willing to do more. But that's not cheap because we have to pay them, of course. And then we have to get the dice and the cardboard printed and the tiles cut out into hexagons and the artwork printed onto them. But all of the layout we can do. It's just the manufacturing process, which is so expensive, and the miniatures, which we're not talented enough to produce, but we have the agreements of these companies, for the most part, nailed down. We know they'll support us. I mean, there's some risk, of course, in all of that, but
and I suppose from that side of things, and correct me if I'm wrong, but essentially you're using existing ranges. You're not looking at producing miniatures specifically for Polyversal.
We are not. If someone wants to, I'm not going to say no, because I would be honored if someone wanted to do that. I don't want to, but what I don't want to become is a sort of monolithic universe that we demand you play in. I don't want you to. I want you to like what I write. I mean, I've written up. I mean, I can bore you with some of the details of the fictional universe I've written up, but you know, it's a fictional universe. If you don't like it, fine. I don't care. I mean, it would be. I would love it if you did like it because I like it. But if you already have your own, I mean, the thing is, what amazes me about the internet is everyone seems to have their own fictional universe. All of us do. I mean, in your head right now, you probably have some notion of some unit that you would love to create that doesn't exist in any real, you know, universe. It was just some weird unit of Leicester rebels that are fighting against the crown or something. I don't know what your particular, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, everybody has that sort of fantasy, whatever it is. Wouldn't it be cool if, you know, we had this type of unit in this game? Well, that's what this is. I mean, this is that game. But, you know, officially speaking, the timeline that I'm working on, the combatants include the United Nations, which has become the de facto world government. There's a mercenary outfit that you can imagine is something like Blackwater from the United States. It's called Balkenkreuz Sicherheit GmbH. It's a German security company, we'll call it. I have a unit of separatists that are basically the New Hampshire State Guard. At some point after the United States joins the UN in the future of this timeline, New Hampshire, of course, decides to separate and become its own independent state. They would never tolerate the the United States agreeing to any other country having any kind of authority. And so, you know, just like any other country, I'm sure there would be separatists all over the world if countries decided to unite under the UN as an actual government, a sovereign government. And so there are lots of battles that would take place among those kind of things. So we'll have some written down, but if you want to create your own, if there's some weird outpost of people in Wales, for example, that want to fight against that, you can make your own unit of Welsh, Liberation Army, and it would be just fine. I mean, it wouldn't really bother anyone. But the game will have units that sort of form the model of that, so you won't have to think of all that on your own if you're not that sort of person. But I find that most gamers are ultimately that sort of person.
So we haven't really discussed the fluff. You've gone into a bit there. I'm kind of guessing that it's going to be based on Earth, or are you looking at having it, a pseudo sci-fi on other planets, global sort of combat, or global warfare, or some solar system based warfare, or?
No, because we don't have a space combat component to this. I mean, there's no spaceship combat. You can't really do that with this system. I guess you could probably do it with this system, but this isn't designed for that. As a campaign concept, you could do that. I haven't written. I mean, a campaign would be a wonderful expansion to make for me, but I'm not sure I'm going to get to a full-on campaign in this fluff. What I've got right now are a series of scenarios that just take you through a couple of battles to give you some flavor for it, and then sort of the invitation to make your own. The timeline that I have in my head, the trick now is, what's weird about writing a timeline for a fictional timeline is that you have to choose where in the timeline you put the story. And then, because you have to write up until that point, and then you really have to write after that point. But it's weird because I don't know how to tense things when I'm writing. I don't know whether I'm writing from the year 2105 or the year 2175. So is what I'm writing about happening now in the game, or is it in the past? I have to keep track. I will admit, I am not a fiction writer. It's not my calling, although I'm apparently somewhat good at it. I would like to get some more, and we intend to get some better writers than me to come up with this, but I'm at least fleshing out the timeline so that we'll have people to fill that in. But one of the things so right now, the wars that I'm writing about for the box set, and then this hasn't been nailed down, but what I'm thinking is we're going to confine the stories in the game to a series of battles that happen on Earth in the year, let's call it right up until 2100. So not too far in the future, but far enough in the future that you can assume enough has changed, that the world is quite different than it was. Technology has certainly moved on. A number of things that exist now have evolved a lot. The environment has completely deteriorated because the United Nations, once the governments of the world basically unite under the United Nations, let's just assume that happens. And I realize that people have their own political problems with that already, which is great. I love that. The governments of the world, of course, try to control the weather because the environment becomes more and more difficult, and the economy of the world being what it is requires that. And so they do it. They create like a scalar electromagnetic weather control system to keep the Earth on balance. That works great for about 15 years. And then inadvertently, it pokes a hole in the magnetosphere. And suddenly, within 5 years, we're all going to be irradiated. Entirely irradiated by the sun, and there's pretty much nothing we can do about it. So, way to go, UN. Everything worked according to plan, and you've killed all of us. Brilliant. Well, at that point, what happens is the UN government decides we need to get people off of Earth. And so they create what's called Polyversal, which is a code name for a project that has an official name of the United Nations Humanivac Operation for the Peoples of Earth. And for your Orwell fans out there, that works out to Unhope.
Clever.
I like it.
Unhope is exactly as effective as you would imagine. There's a lottery. We tell, the Secretary General comes on the TV or I guess the net at that point and says, yeah, you're going to get an email or whatever the equivalent of that is. If you're on the list, you're on the list. Show up at this site on this day, and we will teleport you off-world to your safety. If you're not on the list, well, it's been fun. Sorry, you're going to be irradiated. We can't possibly use ships to get everyone off of Earth because we don't have nearly enough ships or time. We have a number of space elevators that can bring people and cargo off the planet's surface, but we don't have nearly enough capacity to move everyone and everything off the planet in 5 years, much less, a few years or 10 years. I mean, we just don't. And naturally, the world devolves into hysteria at that point. And so I think the game's going to be set up somewhere in there. People fighting over access to get out, people fighting over what's left, people fighting just because, people fighting everything around them, people trying to survive in the coming, apocalypse, basically. I think I'm going to stop the game writing there, because if you stop it there, you, the gamer, are free to imagine what happens to the people leaving, where they're going, whether they get there, what happens once they get there, how the people who are already on Mars and on, Europa or wherever else we can get, like the idea that we're now going to exfiltrate, a quarter of the world's population to those planets that they happily settled 20 years ago. So you can imagine any number of conflicts there. I assume some of you are noting that I haven't mentioned any aliens or giant kaiju or anything like that. If that's your thing, if you just need to have bugs or giant lizards, you can do that. If you want to imagine that everyone's mutated into zombies on their way to Mars, for example, the rules, I think, will allow you to bolt. What I'm doing is building, like, the core rules work fine. I'm building a whole lot of things you can bolt on when you design a unit, and some of those things include psychology, special abilities, that kind of stuff. And so while the rules may not refer to a giant walking lizard that's 10 stories tall, you can imagine that if you built the rules out for a robot that's that big, with a few special abilities, it would effectively behave like a giant, lizard. And so you could just use your lizard model and play Godzilla if you wanted to. Or if you had an alien, if you had the bugs that everyone wants to use, you could do that. I mean, you could create a hive mind. There's a hive mind rule for sort of hive psychology that you can adapt to your rules so that they would take stress differently, for example. The main rules, you take stress under certain examples. Hive-minded units might take it differently, or they might degrade at a different rate, things like that.
But like you say, Ken, I mean, as long as you get the basic rules right and you got enough in there to cover what you want to do with the box set, you let that go, and then you basically follow the crowd and see where they want the game to go.
Right.
And that's where you sort of push it, from there on.
Yeah, and what I want to see, I really do want one day to look out onto the web and find blogs of people talking about battles for things that they've made up that, I just never thought of, which I think would be great. I mean, I love reading those now. So to see where people take it at that point would be kind of fun, fluff-wise.
We've got all this in place. I'm assuming you're still going through what is something of a beta test at the moment?
Yeah, we're doing we have a closed test going on. We're keeping it pretty close inside because I don't want to send it out until I'm very comfortable. What I think we're going to do is we're going to build like a little kit that has a few units, a scenario, the basic rules, none of the design rules, because that's really where the meat is, I think, for people who want to get their hands on it. But it will give you a flavor of how the game is played, what it feels like to command units under these restrictions. And you'll be able to print those out, and it'll be a couple of APC units and some infantry and some tanks. And you can use your Land Raiders and your Space Marines if you have those. You can use your World War II guys if you have micro armor. Or, frankly, you could use any micro armor. It would be actually modern micro armor would be kind of cool in this game. So that will allow people to get a sense of the game. But we're not there yet. I want to really nail down the closed beta first, and I doubt we'll be opening it up to major. I doubt we'll ever put the whole thing up as a PDF, for example, and just invite people to hammer at it.
Yeah.
No, I think you need to. I mean, when it comes to playtesting, you need to build up a small group of people who will give you honest feedback.
That's hard to do.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because most times people come to you are interested in what you want to do, and almost like fanboys. It took us quite a while with Saga to get a decent batch of playtesters. we started off on a very small group of playtesters. That's grown now, but we found the ones that we've invited in are the ones who gave us most hassle, actually on the forum. So therefore, the ones who were going to try and break a rule, we brought them in quite early. So break the rules whilst it's in beta.
Right.
So, but I think that's difficult if you haven't got a sort of forum where you're talking about the game early on. It's quite difficult to get a good group of playtesters. But unfortunately, it's something you really need to try and do. But I think you'll get there.
I agree, and we have had that, and it's funny you said break a rule, because that's, I remember running this not too long ago, and we put up a unit of mechs that I had adapted from Mech Warrior, the Click game. I just broke them off their bases and used them as larger scale mechs in this game, and I had spec'd them all out using the rules, and we put them into the game, and everyone who played the game for like 6 or 7 games who had those units on their side were saying how horrible it was. And I couldn't figure out what was wrong, like why these were the only people who were giving us bad feedback, and I didn't know why. And we finally figured out that it was because the units they were using looked much more badass than the statistics that the game modeled for them. You know what I mean? That the robots just looked cooler than the statistics allowed them to be in the game. And that's when I learned something. I was like, well, that's kind of important. Like, you can't have a bad... People have ingrained notions of the way giant walking robots are supposed to behave on a battlefield. And if the rules don't match that, it's a problem. And we fixed it now. They survive much better than they did. Part of the problem was I had underarmed them. And they were under-armored and under-weaponized. So they looked really great. They would walk right towards the enemy, and then they would blow up. And so the people using them were really mad at me. But that's my fault for balancing the game the way I did. I have fixed that. That will not be a problem now. And if anything, they're more likely to degrade through stress than they are blow up.
So, when are we likely to see this coming towards Kickstarter? And also, have you got any plans on exactly when, obviously assuming that it gets funded, this whole thing, we're actually likely to see Polyversal in print?
Well, I will say the Kickstarter we have sworn to ourselves will be this year. That's the most accurate I can be at the moment, in part because any day now my wife is going to give birth to our second child.
Yeah, that kind of tends to put a bit of a dent in things, doesn't it?
And as you know, that's an easy excuse for me. It's although a very valid one. I want very badly to be done worrying about it, and I want to get it out there and worry about it at a whole new level, which is, will people like it, rather than is it done being written. I'm at that point. I remember Henry Hyde talking about, he had the book done, but there was full of these little notes that said photo here, and then he realized he had to take 1,000 photographs that he hadn't imagined. And I'm looking at a page right now that has 12 pictures that say insert diagram or example. So I have to go back and write all the examples using the units I know will end up in the box. And so
right, yes,
we're at that point. I think it'll be third to fourth quarter of this year before the Kickstarter goes up. I think it will take us months after that, if not a year, to get it online, depending, of course, on how big it goes. I mean, the nice problem with Kickstarter is there's no upper end. I doubt we'll be in the multi-million-dollar Bones, Reaper kind of problem. I'd love for that to be the problem, but we're not prepared for that. If we are, we'll have to adapt rapidly if there's huge demand for this. I expect we'll be in the several thousand interested party range, and comfortably we'll be able to do that. The miniatures manufacturers will have to tool up for 10,000 of each tank. That's probably beyond their normal order. Brigade is not a big outfit, just like we aren't. If we had to order a whole lot of 2 or 3 models of their tank, they're going to need some lead time. Marios is a one-man operation in Greece, and that's sort of the neat thing about 6 mil in particular, is there are a lot of these smaller outfits that are making really wonderful stuff, but they're not making tens of thousands of them at a time. So we don't expect to require that, but we will require probably more than they normally make at once. but they know that. I mean, we're not. We've been talking to them for a while now, so they're ready. We just haven't. They need to know whether we're going to print 1,000 of these or not before they go turn 1,000 copies of pewter miniatures. They may or may not be able to sell very quickly.
Yeah, certainly. Okay, so Polyversal we're in a state where hopefully we'll see it sometime in the next 18 months as a final boxed game, and if that's hopefully before then we get to speak to you again. Is that something I think it'd be a case of once we get through to that point, and maybe even as Kickstarter launches or just afterwards, it'd be good to catch up with where things are and where you've got to with stuff.
Oh, absolutely! I would love that. Neil, I've loved this show for a long time. It's an honor to be on here, and if you're willing to have me, I'm happy to be here.
Fantastic! I think that'd be really good to do. I mean, thanks for coming on tonight, and it's been really interesting to listen to where you are with things at the moment, and the concept of where you've come from. It will also be interesting, I think, to maybe get you on every now and again just to kind of have a quick update of where things are. If it's a case of just kind of get a chance to kind of chat with you for 10 minutes from time to time, just to kind of have a quick update on how things are going, and hey, if nothing else, find out how the baby is.
Yeah, right. Or maybe I can suggest some music to play while you're playing Polyversal as well.
Yeah, that sounds good. I mean, it'd be really nice because we're always talking about games which either are just about to come out or have just come out or have been out for a little while. It'd be really nice to follow that design process, all the way through from where you are now to the game being released and we're all playing it. It'd be lovely to actually do that every couple of months and sort of say, over the last few months, right, we finalised this bit of rules, or we've done this, we've done that. That'd be really interesting.
And it'll help, I suppose, from some people may not. I know we talk about game design a lot on the show, but it will be another perspective on how a game comes together, and what. I mean, I'm sure there are people out there who have their own ideas on how to put a game together and stuff that they'd like to do. And if it's a case of you can give people ideas on what's going on and give people inspiration, I think that'd be really good.
Yeah, I would love that. I mean, I've really learned a whole lot while doing this myself, and it's kind of the information that I don't know how useful it is to most people, but it's certainly interesting to gamers, I think. I mean, I'm at the point now. I keep telling my wife this. She asked me, people are like, "How's your game going?" Thinking it's like a board game that requires like a 3-page rule book and a bunch of little cardboard pieces. And as soon as I explain to them that it's like a 40-page, 20-some thousand word book, they like their eyes glaze over. But I'm at the point now. I was telling my wife the other night, I have it all in my head, but there's so much of it now that if I move something, if I change a number somewhere, I have a really hard time thinking through all of the ways it will affect the balance. It's too complex a system to do in your head. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of games, I mean, if you change the price of a property on the Monopoly board, you'll know pretty quickly that it's out of whack with everything else. It's very hard to do over something as variable as a system that involves 5 levels of statistic over 6 or 7 different types of statistic. And a nearly infinite number of permutations for vehicles that you could create. So, there will people who are, and in fact, I will add this too, since we're talking about we're having an update. One of the things I haven't finalized is the point system. And one of the reasons for that is about several years ago now, Henry Hobbs and you said that you would be talking about point systems on The View from the Veranda. And I was waiting for that because I can't figure it out.
Us for this sort of thing.
As soon as that episode of View from the Veranda goes online, I will finish the point system for Polyversal. It's that important to me.
Don't get him started on point system.
I'm happy to be there as a guest, in fact. I would love to weigh in on that. That is now occupying much of my spare cognitive time. I mean, balancing a point system for something as variable and complex as this is not easy. And I'm actually leaning towards, like, I'm really impressed by the way War Machine does it, where things are now like 1 or 2 points instead of 400 points, or the way a lot of games do it.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking closer to that kind of. I'd rather have things ballparked into, you can take 1 or 2 of these and 1 or 2 of these and 1 or 2 of these, rather than you have 238 points of this and 312 points of that. Because I think the easier I can make, I envision the way to choose an army in this game to be rifle through the box of tiles or cards that you printed out, pick a few that look cool, stick them together, and see how close they are. And if they're not that close, shift 1 or 2 and you're done. Rather than spend a week with a spreadsheet and army builder and nickel and diming whether you have machine guns or repeating machine guns and whether you add 2 points for that, or I can do all of that, but I don't find it very much fun anymore. I probably did more when I was a teenager than I do now.
This conversation could go on and on.
Well, I shall certainly have a conversation with Henry, and now we understand just what sort of time pressure we're under to produce that. So you can finish your game. I will go back to Henry and stress that we need to think about doing this.
Please do.
Or you just don't bother using the point system at all and just have almost static army lists like the OBATs from historical wargaming.
Yeah, I can't really do that. I could just ignore it and say, and you're right, this conversation could be a whole thing, because this breaks down into UK mentality versus US mentality, which is, are you a tournament gamer, or are you going down to the club to play at, and then have a beer? I'm more of a club gamer, which is unique in the United States, I think, because most people here are very competitive and want everything equally balanced. I don't really care. I just want to throw dice and tell stories. But, most people here don't feel that way, so I have to be aware of that.
Well, let's cover that in the next podcast.
That sounds like a subject for another for a completely other podcast. And obviously, having somebody from another gaming culture giving a completely a different perspective on things. I mean, obviously we've got a very kind of UK bias in our particular views. I think that would be an interesting conversation to have, personally.
I would love that.
Well done, Ken. You're now our man from the colonies.
I'll take that. Will you send me some McVitie's chocolate covered digestives or something? Like, there are a few snacks we can't get here that are really good.
Okay, jot them down on an email. I'll see what I can do. I'll send some sort of Meeples and Miniatures Red Cross parcel to you.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
We'll swap you for a copy of the rules.
I'm a sucker for those things. You get the dark chocolate covered digestives. If you send me a few tubes of those, I'll send you. I'll send you the rules. No problem.
Oh, right. Okay, you're right.
I'm easy. We don't have those here. They're really good.
So, before we go, Ken, how can the guys who will listen to this, and obviously the girls, keep in touch with Polyversal?
Especially the girls. We have a Facebook page right now. If you search for Polyversal, I think you'll come up with a band called the Polyversal Souls and us. We are not them. You'll know which one's which. We're the ones with the robots and the tanks and stuff. We're on Facebook. Colin's Epic Wargames has a Facebook presence. I have a Twitter account called @WeeklyWargamer. Colin's Epic Wargames is on Twitter as well @CE Wargames. And we also have a website for the game, which is www.polyversal-game.com. Admittedly, the website is mostly static right now while we develop the game, but it definitely will become a source of more information as we get closer to the Kickstarter.
Oh, sounds good. And the website is very good. There's some nice stuff on there.
Oh, thank you.
There's a great couple of examples of artwork. Some interesting bits of fluff, and obviously talks about the various companies that are involved in what Ken and Collins are pulling together. So definitely worth a visit.
Yeah, that's true. And there are links to all those pages. If you can't wait for the game and you want to start painting miniatures, they all make really good stuff, and you'll be well served by it, frankly. I have most of it already anyway.
That's the kind of curse of some wargaming, isn't it? But at the end of the day, as you say, it's the inspiration. Is it? Okay, I have all these models. What can I? What game can I play with them?
Well, now you have an answer to that question.
Indeed.
Well, Ken, it's been fantastic to have you on the show. Thank you very much for taking the time out to speak to us. And I wish you all the very best as you continue to develop Polyversal and bring it to market. We look forward to hearing from you again. And more immediately, I wish you and your family all the very best with the upcoming birth of your new baby. And all the very best to you and your wife.
Oh, thank you very much.
That goes for me as well.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you. Take care.
The Meeples and Miniatures podcast is very happy to be sponsored by Coat d'Arms Paints. Now, Coat d'Arms have been supporting miniatures painters with their products for well over 20 years in some way, shape or form. Their current range is 150 sets of acrylic paint, which are available both as individual colours, but also in paint sets depending on period. Things such as the Ancients paint set, the World War II German, World War II American, World War II Russian paint sets, and they also include things like an ACW set and even a Horsetown set. That's one way to purchase your paints. And they also do triads. Now, if you're a fan of the 3-colour system made famous by the likes of people like Kevin Dallimore, you may like to purchase your paints with a dark shade, a medium shade and a highlight. And the triad system from Coat d'Arms allows you to do this. They also have ranges of textured paints called Brushscape, which allow you to paint from textures onto bases as well as colour. And these are ideal especially for smaller scale models. And if you're a fan of the dip method of painting, then Coat d'Arms have their own product available called Super Shader. This is available in light brown, dark brown and black. Coat d'Arms Paints have a whole range of products available to try. Check them out at www.blackhat.co.uk and be sure to tell them that we sent you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that chat with Ken. And as we said during the interview, we'll be coming back to Ken every couple of months and finding out how game design is going and how things are shaping up, both prior to the Kickstarter, during the project itself, and in subsequent months. Before we go, just one thing more to say, and that's actually to say a hearty congratulations to Ken and his family. We mentioned near the start of the interview that at the time Ken's wife was expecting their second child, and Grayson was born on the 10th of March. So congratulations to the entire Whitehurst family, and all the best from everyone here at the Meeples and Miniatures podcast. Well, that's about all we've got time for this show. Don't forget you can always give us feedback on the show, either via email, comments on the blog or our Facebook page. Details will follow during the end credits. So until next time, as always, happy gaming, take care, and we'll speak to you very soon. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Meeples and Miniatures podcast. If you want to know more about Meeples and Miniatures, there are several things you can do. First of all, you can visit the website at www.meeplesandminiatures.co.uk. If you want to contact the show at all, you can email me at neil@meeplesandminiatures.co.uk. You can follow the show on Twitter. Simply look for M&M Podcast or click the follow us on Twitter button from the website. We also have a group on Facebook. That's the Meeples and Miniatures Podcast Fan Club. Again, follow the link from the website. And finally, if you want to help us to support the show, you can always donate to the podcast by clicking the PayPal button on the donate page, again found on the website. Once again, thank you for listening. I hope you've really enjoyed the show. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon.